performed those things that I've asked him to do very well and very competently.
Does that include his dealings with other PSC staff members?
The goals that he has had, he has fulfilled. If he has been impatient in the process, that's a personality trait, but it does not impinge on the quality of his product.
What if this bill leader situation, regardless of the outcome, what if it stays with you and affects your election chances?
I don't know what will happen in the future, but I do know that we're talking about a personnel problem at the Public Service Commission. It is now being handled fairly and properly, and I'm sure that the outcome will be appropriate.
By all accounts, Mr. Leader's manner is, to say the least, abrasive. Is he useful to you because in politics, every organization has to have a tough guy or an enforcer?
Mr. Leader's function at the Commission is neither as a tough guy nor as an enforcer. His function at the Commission is to do research, to do speech writing, and to advise me on the substantive work of the Commission.
Great.
Commissioner, a hearing has been scheduled to consider the bill leader situation. How do you feel about that? Will he be cleared, or do you think he's on his way out? Is he going to lose his job?
I can't predict what the conclusion the hearing is going to bring about. What I can say is that having a fair hearing for Mr. Leader is all I've asked for, and I'm glad, for the sake of fairness to him and fairness to the Commission, that we are going to have such a hearing.
What is the legislature going to do this session regarding the PSC?
I can't predict what the legislature is going to do. They have some bills in that they will either vote up or down in their wisdom, and it would just be impossible to anticipate.
Isn't the fact that they are considering some substantial changes in the nature of the PSC, isn't that a response to the mess that's been made up there with all of the fighting and bickering that's going on?
It's the legislature's job to come up with the ideal solution to any kind of problem that they see, or to improve when there is no problem. I don't know what promoted the bills, but I think that the legislature would be functioning appropriately to look at an agency and see if there's some way it can be approved.
Don't you think the public is starting to see the Public Service Commission as a personal battleground between you and Frank Cochran?
I don't know how the public views the Public Service Commission. I would hope that they view it as a competent agency doing its job, protecting the consumers of the state of Tennessee, trying to keep rates as low as possible, service as high as possible, and that we have done.
Well, Commissioner, you have to admit that, truthfully, that the problems that you've had with Frank Cochran seriously damage your image as a potential candidate.
I don't agree with the assumption that you make. I feel that the problems that have occurred are internal and have no impact on anything outside the Commission.
How badly has the integrity and the credibility of the Commission been damaged by all of the recent controversy?
The integrity and credibility of the Public Service Commission is measured by how well we do our job, and we do it very well, and I don't think it's been damaged at all.
In considering whether or not to run for the Senate and in any potential strategy in a campaign, how much have you considered the impact of the controversy that has been going on in the Commission?
Obviously, uh, an internal affair at the a personnel problem at the Public Service Commission really has no impact on issues that might be before the United States Senate. One is an administrative problem, and it really has no bearing on a subsequent race that I or someone else might make.
Does the ability to deal effectively with people enter into the job of a United States Senator?
Of course, it's important that I be able to communicate with my constituents and to be able to deal with my colleagues. I feel that I'm perfectly capable and competent to do both of those things, as well as to represent the people of Tennessee in the Congress of the United States.
Are you going to run for the United States Senate?
I have no idea. It's too early to know what will happen in the future. I'm certainly looking at it very carefully, but I have made no decision and don't know what the future will bring.
Okay, good.
Great.
Our guest now on Nashville Channel 4 magazine.
Was that lever supposed to stay down? It didn't.
No, it's supposed to come up. Our guest on Channel 4 magazine this afternoon is Commissioner Jane Eskind of the Public Service Commission. Welcome to Channel 4 magazine.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Commissioner, the most recent item in the news involving the commission involves the state legislature. Last year there was a bill that was considered to change the nature of the commission somewhat. It's come up again this year. The major question seems to be whether or not the legislature itself should elect the commissioners. What is your position on this issue?
I feel that I do a better job if I'm the employee of all the people of Tennessee and not just the person who is employed by the state legislature to be the regulator of utilities and the transportation industry.
I think what the legislature in Senator Henry's bill is addressing is the fact that all the people includes the very people that you are to regulate. And under the present system, commissioners accept campaign contributions from, very often, the very people that they are to regulate. Under that system, isn't it virtually impossible to assure impartiality?
Not at all. We really only are involved with a very few number of people who are actually regulated, and the vast majority of people in Tennessee are the constituents I'm concerned with, who are the ratepayers, the consumers. They pay the bills that we set. It's no different, of course, for us in terms of campaign financing than it is for the governor, who accepts campaign contributions from the banks or the highway construction people, the judges who accept campaign contributions from attorneys. It's the way the system is, and unless we go to public financing for elections, the system predicts that the people who are interested in the candidate or the office are the ones who are going to be involved with campaign contributions. By far and away, most of my contributions came from my friends and family and Democratic supporters, and very few in proportion actually came from the regulated.
That was going to be my next question. Is it fair to say, or is it not true, that I think the concern is that with the Public Service Commission, a larger portion of your contributions come from sources in which there could at some point be a conflict of interest?
Well, of course, there's a potential conflict of interest just about everywhere. There's nothing that we do that doesn't have a real serious economic impact on the state of Tennessee. And you cannot just single out one industry. What we do has an impact on how you do economically, and what we do has an impact on any business, any industry, any household in Tennessee. So the special interests really are the people of Tennessee.
Have you ever felt uncomfortable during a hearing, for instance, or the decision-making process that involved someone who contributed, or a organization that contributed to your campaign?
Actually, the answer to the question is no, I've never been uncomfortable. Part of the reason is that I was not directly and personally involved in fundraising, and I have very little knowledge of who actually did contribute.
Do you think the legislature is trying to clean up what they consider to be the mess of the present system, or do you think that they are trying to change one or more of the present commissioners?
I have no idea what the legislature is thinking. It's hard for me to predict or to guess with any degree of accuracy what their agenda is. I feel that the Public Service Commission does a very good job, which is probably the untold story of the whole conversation about the Public Service Commission, is that we do a job and we do it very, very well. And we're very proud of the work that we do. We have different divisions, all of them filled with highly technical and trained people, and the work of the Commission is done and the people of Tennessee are well served. There's never been any discussion about whether or not we do our job well.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know why it is. It would be hard for me to speculate on that unless we have not managed to get our story across and become as well known to all the people of the state. It may be that what we do in each community is a little bit different, so that there is no one thing that we do, except we do regulate telephones everywhere. Otherwise, in some communities, we regulate the gas company, and others we don't. Same is true of water. And in only one community do we regulate electricity.
Since you brought up telephones, what's going to happen to telephone rates? You know, the telephone company has been in the news so much recently because of the AT&T divestiture and that situation. Can you predict at this point anything about what will happen to telephone rates to the average consumer?
It's hard to predict. I have heard others make predictions that telephone rates could double, perhaps triple. This is such a difficult and confusing time with what is going to happen with the telephone company. Our whole system of pricing is changing. We used to have telephone service that was based like you go into a restaurant and you order the complete dinner. That was the way we bought our telephone service. Now we're going to a system where it's more like an a la carte meal or like a cafeteria, where you just take certain portions of the service that you want and you pay for what you use. The pricing will be different. Competition was allowed to come into the industry, and that the competition was in the more lucrative areas which had cross-subsidized and local telephone service. Now that there is competition, now that the federal government has changed the way that the telephone company is set up, structured, function, and how it can charge, it will have an impact on the cost of local service, and I am very much concerned and looking for ways to keep local service costs down so that telephones can be affordable for most people as they are now.
You know, most discussion about the changing the PSC, a recent article in the Nashville Tennessean again mentioned the recent Bill Leader controversy. Is this controversy a fight between Mr. Leader and Commissioner Cochran, or is it another round in the fight between Commissioner Eskind and Commissioner Cochran?
It's hard for me to get into someone else's mind and figure out why things happened the way they did. I can speculate, and it probably would not be very productive. The important thing about the situation that affects all of us, including Mr. Leader and Mr. Cochran and myself, is that we have asked for, and Mr. Leader will receive an impartial hearing where all the facts will become known, and then we can make an intelligent judgment based on all of the facts and not just allegations here and rumors there.
Do you feel comfortable with the situation at this point?
It was what I had wanted all along, was that a fair and impartial hearing be held and that all the facts become available.
Let's turn to politics, Commissioner. Representative Albert Gore Jr. has filed papers establishing an exploratory campaign finance committee for a possible bid for the United States Senate, Senator Baker's seat. Is Representative Gore the front runner at this point?
I would think not. My sense is that Representative Gore has been a congressman representing a congressional district, which was 1/8 of the state of Tennessee. I, on the other hand, have run and now represent all of the people of Tennessee. It seems to me that that it is not a question of Mr. Gore being the front runner, but a question of where should he decide to run, where he would need to go and what he would need to do in order to catch up with the obvious statewide recognition and support that I already have.
Are you saying that you are the front runner at this point?
I would think, without having polled it, that that is possible, and if not probable.
That was going to be one of my next questions. Are you planning any polls to help you make up your mind about whether or not to enter the race?
Well, I have not made any decision about what I will or won't do. I've always been a very careful candidate who's used all the tools that are available to me, and of course polling would be one tool that I would take advantage of at a time that was appropriate.
You have not taken one
No.
at this point? What will be the deciding factor? What do you think will be the deciding factor that will make up your mind whether or not to run?
There's so many factors that go into a decision. One has to decide what one wants to do, what one wants to do ultimately, whether or not you can afford to take a risk, how big is the risk, what do you have the energy and the resources and the support that it would take to make a race. Races are very costly. How do you want to spend the next period of years in your life? Where do you want to make a contribution? Where can you make the best contribution? There's so many questions that must be taken into consideration.
Should you decide to run, will the bill leader controversy have any impact on voters in a Senate race in which you would be a candidate?
It's hard for me to say how the voters will feel about any of the given issues that will be before them. There will be a lot of issues in the Senate race that have an impact on the United States Senate itself, and I personally don't see that a controversy, internal controversy at the PSC would have much impact on the United States Senate.
Bart Gordon said this morning that he feels Representative Gore is obviously the best candidate for the Democrats to field. Why would Mr. Gordon make such a statement before any candidate has even declared a candidacy?
I don't know why Mr. Gordon would make that statement. I think he would be the best source of information on that. It is certainly no secret that Mr. Gordon wants to run for Congress, and that might have been his motivation, but it's speculative on my part to guess what his reasons would have been or what judgments went into that statement, if in fact he made that statement.
Point of curiosity
I forgot that one.
to end the interview. Who would you like to see as the Democratic candidate for president?
Well, obviously, my interest in the Democratic candidate for president is the person who can win. I think the Democratic Party historically has been a party of concern with people, with their issues, with their daily lives, and it's important to me that the Democratic agenda and the concern it has had historically for people and be the agenda for the future, and I would like to see us nominate a candidate who embodies the best traditions of our party and who speaks to the cries of people who are suffering now, and people are suffering now.
Commissioner, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Trucks carrying products through the state are not inspected often enough, another point with which Eskind disagrees. Eskind and her fellow commissioner, Frank Cochran, are both planning to run for the Democratic nomination for governor, and she's wondering if politics are involved.
Something for someone else to answer, but I can't see any other justification for it, so that question has to be raised.
Eskind says the PSC has been operating for almost 100 years without the state agency questioning how it represents consumers. Ron Howes is just ahead.
I can't see any other justification for it, so that question has to be raised.
The 66-page report found more than a half-dozen areas where auditors concluded the PSC comes up short.
Officials at the State Board of Education say they've resolved only one appeal.
Corporation of America was already the largest hospital management firm in the country when it bought Hospital Affiliates International 2 years ago. It's the repercussions from that acquisition that have come to the GAO's attention. Congressman Bill Gradison of Cincinnati, Ohio, says he received a report that after HCA purchased a Virginia hospital in that deal, the
I think different in the Democratic primary is different from other places in the state.
For most of the past 60 years, Memphis voting patterns have been strongly influenced by machine politics, once by the E.H. Crump machine, more recently by that of Congressman Harold Ford and his politically active family, a family that includes the congressman, his brother John, a state senator, another brother, City Councilman James Ford, and yet another, Emmett, who was a state representative until his conviction for insurance fraud. If there is a Democratic race in Tennessee, at least one candidate will try to win Congressman Harold Ford's endorsement, and with that endorsement, support from Ford's Memphis political machine. Ford represents Tennessee's 9th congressional district. The district runs mostly through these inner-city neighborhoods. 57% of the voters in this district are black. It is among those voters that Ford wields his influence. It's that influence that attracts other candidates to Ford. They want Ford's endorsement.
The commitment continues.
Ford claims an impressive record. In the last 2 presidential races, Ronald Reagan was Tennessee's choice. But Jimmy Carter and later Walter Mondale were Harold Ford's picks. Carter and Mondale carried Memphis. In 1978, Harold Ford endorsed Jake Butcher. Butcher won the primary in Memphis. In 1982, it was Randy Tyree. Incumbent Lamar Alexander won the general election, but Tyree carried Memphis. It is difficult to pinpoint just how much a Ford endorsement means, but few would question that it can make the difference between a favored candidate winning and losing within Memphis's 9th congressional district.
How are you? I'm Harold Ford. You doing all right, sir? Yeah. Good.
Ford's strongest tools are his Get Out the Vote campaign and the Ford ballot. Ford's workers try to register as many new voters as possible. On Election Day, he helps voters get to the polls.
Now I'm picking up on 02, a wheelchair voter.
There, Ford and his poll workers suggest how they ought to vote in each race. The names are on the Ford ballot.
I appreciate it if you give me your vote when you go inside. Got it? Thank you very much. I appreciate it very much. That Attorney General's really appreciate for AC Warden. We need a good lead in the Attorney General's office.
The Ford ballot goes out just before Election Day. It looks a lot like the ballot voters will see inside the booth, except that the congressman's choices are marked in bold letters with pictures. This is from the 1982 general election. This week, another Ford ballot will be out for Thursday's Democratic primary. But Ford's endorsements are already known. This time, his choice for governor is Jane Eskind.
Yes, I am. I'm endorsing Jane Eskind for the governor's race.
Harold Ford and I have been friends for a long time. I first met Harold when he was in the House of Representatives in Nashville, and we are politically and personal friends.
And that is all some Memphis voters need to know.
Are you going to vote for Jane Eskind?
Jane Eskind running for governor? Yeah. Okay, is Ford supporting Jane Eskind? Yeah, whoever Ford supported, I support.
Congressman Ford is himself running for re-election. He's opposed by Memphis Attorney Walter Evans, but Ford is expected to win easily, to return to Congress, and to his seat on the House Ways and Means Committee, despite the fact that a federal grand jury has been probing his personal financial affairs since March.
So I think we're probably stronger than ever in the polls. We've seen that now in the black community we're running about 92, 93%. That is about the same as we've been able to run in the past. And in the white precincts, we've increased about 14 percentage points.
Jane Eskind is banking on Ford's strength to help her win the Democratic nomination for governor.
I'm pleased that I have the Ford family support. All the candidates wanted it. All of them worked very hard to get it. And I'm grateful that they thought I best represented their constituents.
Rival candidates Richard Fulton and Ned Bickwarder are well aware of Ford's ability to help Eskind or any other candidate.
I know Congressman Ford has a powerful, powerful organization. And I need all the help I can get in Memphis to counteract that big majority of votes that he'll be giving Congressman Ford will be helping get for Commissioner Eskind.
Political support is often based on friendships and shared philosophies, but an examination of Ford's finances, reflected in financial disclosure statements, sworn testimony in open court, and interviews by Channel 4 News, suggests there may be more to Ford's endorsements than a shared philosophy. There is also a pattern of borrowing from candidates Ford has endorsed. The pattern goes back many years. John J. Hooker and Harold Ford have been political friends for a long time.
I had supported him for Congress, both financially and otherwise. He had supported me when I ran for governor of Tennessee. I like to tease him that I got more black votes in his congressional district than he did.
Hooker ran for governor twice and lost. In 1976, he ran for U.S. Senate. Despite Ford's help, he lost again. Hooker's told a federal grand jury in Memphis that in 1976, he made a personal loan to Harold Ford, a $25,000 loan, and 10 years later is still waiting for his money.
Who would be the best governor in Tennessee? And I think this...
Ford also counted flamboyant Knoxville banker Jake Butcher among his friends. Butcher counted Ford among his borrowers. According to campaign disclosure statements, Butcher, his family, and business associates gave Ford's 1976 campaign $5,000. 2 years later, Butcher was running for governor. Ford was up for re-election. They needed each other's help. This time, according to disclosure records, Butcher and his associates gave Ford's campaign nearly $10,000. Ford helped Butcher carry Memphis. And in 1982, Ford supported another Butcher-backed candidate, Randy Tyree. Federal disclosure forms and bankruptcy records show that Ford and his family's funeral home were substantial borrowers from Butcher-controlled banks. The funeral home borrowed $137,000 from Southern Industrial Banking Corporation in 1978, an election year. 5 years later, the business still owed $116,000, and the new note has now been executed. On his latest financial disclosure form, Harold Ford lists that he still owes more than $170,000 in old Butcher loans. In recent court testimony, it was revealed that SIBC files contained no loan applications or credit information on Ford, and that the congressman never made any payments on SIBC loans.
How are you? How you doing? I'm fine, thank you.
This year, Ford is backing Jane Eskind for governor. According to Eskind's disclosure statement, her campaign gave $1,000 to the re-election campaign of State Senator John Ford, the congressman's brother. Her husband, Dick, gave $1,000 to Harold Ford's campaign. In a July 20th candidates debate, Eskind said beyond that, neither she nor her husband has loaned Harold Ford any money, either for his campaign or personally.
Have there been any personal expenses covered for Congressman Ford?
No, of course not.
But a few days later, Eskind recalled that her husband had once made a personal loan to Congressman Ford, a loan she said was totally separate from the campaign.
Oh, totally separate and occurred years ago.
Eskind would not elaborate. Despite repeated requests to Congressman Ford, Ford also refuses to provide any information about the transaction. No such loan is reflected in any Ford disclosure statement dating back to 1978. Members of Congress must disclose loans they owe of more than $10,000. However, under a loophole in the 1978 Ethics in Government Act, if Ford's loan is guaranteed by someone else, Ford may not have to report it. Mrs. Eskind's husband, Richard, has spoken to the U.S. Attorney's Office about the loan.
Come down and he talked to them on the phone, and whatever questions they had were resolved.
As far as we know, there is nothing illegal about the loan from Eskind to Ford, but the congressman refuses to talk about it. Ford will not discuss how much money he borrowed, when he borrowed it, or whether the money has been paid back, nor will he discuss any other loans he may have outstanding. What we do know is this. Beginning in 1976, Ford's favorite candidates seemed to be the ones who gave him money. In 1976, John J. Hooker gave Ford $25,000. Ford endorsed him for the U.S. Senate. In 1978, Jake Butcher gave Ford sizable loans and contributions. Ford endorsed him for governor. In 1982, Ford endorsed Randy Tyree, a candidate heavily financed by the butchers. This year, Jane Eskind has received Ford's endorsement for governor after, and she implies long after, her husband gave the congressman a personal loan. Despite the federal investigation and his financial problems, the Ford machine keeps rolling. And a Ford endorsement means a lot to political office seekers. Ford's financial dealings have been under federal grand jury investigation in Memphis since last March. Tomorrow, a closer look at what that grand jury is studying. Jim Travis, Channel 4 News.
Primary campaigning for the governor's office has entered the home.
The choice is McWhirter. Education. The Knoxville Journal says the choice is McWhirter. Jobs.
State proficiency test. But despite that record of achievement, McNairy County school officials, like those in many other Tennessee counties.
When you hear that in McNairy County, Tennessee, this time of year, it usually means one thing. The start of the school year is near. But educators in this rural West Tennessee county haven't always welcomed it because the county's poor. The per capita income is $3,000 less than the state's average. Unemployment is 14.9%, almost twice the state's average. All this translates into one thing, not that much money in the budget for education. McNairy's per pupil expenditure in 1984-85 was $1,413. The state's average was $2,349. The Tennessee Department of Education says there are many counties like McNairy all over the state. So what's in the educational packages of the three Democratic gubernatorial candidates to help such counties? The first issue is teachers' pay. Tennessee ranks 39th in the nation, and McNairy is almost at the bottom.
The starting salary is $14,000 for teachers in McNairy County.
Elizabeth Littlefield teaches special education and adult basic education in McNairy County. She says the salary was low when she began teaching more than 10 years ago, and nothing has really changed since.
Low teacher salaries gives the impression to me, to the students and to the teachers, to the community at large, even to industry that might be interested in coming here, that education is not a primary concern in this county.
The Tennessee Education Association wants teachers' minimum starting salary set at $18,500. On this issue, Ned Ray McWhirter, Jane Eskind, and Richard Fulton agree with the TEA. A second issue is the Career Ladder program. It was designed to attract, keep, and reward outstanding teachers. Some say it needs to be revamped.
In order to effectively judge the program, I decided the only way I could really give an informed decision to the teachers that had asked me about it was to go through it myself.
And Elizabeth Littlefield made it to Career Level 3, meaning she gets a $7,000 bonus for a 12-month contract. Despite her success, Littlefield says the Career Ladder tests contain too many things that have nothing to do with teaching ability, and that the evaluation period, which lasts a year, needs to be shortened. McWhirter agrees.
First, I'd reduce the paperwork. I'd actually eliminate the paperwork, and I'd institute new policies on paperwork and just have the minimum required. I'd change the conversion table. I predict it'll be changed this year. I'd change the portfolio. I predict it'll be changed this year. Who cares whether you've been a Superman or a baseball star or a model to be qualified to teach education? You don't need that in a portfolio.
Eskind wants to do the same.
I think teachers need to have confidence in it, and we need to take out all the extraneous mess that has nothing to do with how well I, the teacher, teach you, the student. What you need to know, how well I fill out forms, how well I do portfolios, really is not relevant, and it's been disheartening to the teachers.
And Fulton says he'll appoint a Career Ladder Study Commission immediately after the November general election.
And I intend, as governor, to sit down with them, along with staff, and to ask for their recommendations so that we can make the Career Ladder work. It's a good program, and I support it, but I also think that there has to be that opportunity for them to sit down and say what they think is wrong with it. And then go.
A third issue is helping students with above-average learning ability, the gifted and talented. Nationally, Tennessee ranks at the bottom of the list in identifying these students. State law says the state must certify those who are gifted and talented, but leaves it up to the counties to tailor special programs for them. Meet 13-year-old Marty Harden of McNairy County. He just graduated as the valedictorian from his 8th grade class with a 97.74 average. He took advantage of the county's programs for the gifted and talented. For instance, classes at Memphis State University.
Memphis State has this program, Saturday Scholars, and you go over there 5 weeks on Saturday morning from 9 to 12, and they have courses that you can take, such as aviation, French, cartooning.
But not many county school systems can do for the gifted and talented like McNairy has done. So what do the candidates offer to help in this area? First, McWhirter.
If you properly manage the Better Schools program and the career ladder that's been discussed so much, and you take career ladder 2 and 3 teachers, it gives you the perfect opportunity, if they're the best teachers